Before we start the show, I'd like to talk to you about Brandwatch, which is a digital consumer intelligence company. It helps businesses better understand their consumers and buyers with clever software that enables them to analyze conversations from across the web and social media. To find out more, visit brandwatch.com, and you can sign up for up-to-the-minute consumer insights in your inbox each week at brandwatch.com/bulletin. And it's worth mentioning that my business, Automated Creative, uses Brandwatch every single day, and our business would be impossible to deliver without it. So it's of real pride that I welcome them as partners for this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I interview one of the industry's leaders about their vision for the future of the industry. And this week is no different. I'm on a call with Craig Fenton, who leads strategy and operations for Google in the UK and Ireland. Craig, for those listeners who didn't hear your first appearance on this podcast, could you give everyone just a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Tom. Nice to be with you again. Yeah, sure. So I'm at Google, been there coming up on 5 years now, and I lead strategy and operations, as you rightly said. Name's pretty descriptive. So with the leadership team, we define the plan for the business in this region and then hopefully operate to that plan. It's about as simple as that, really.
So let's jump into the questions straight away. So what has been the best investment of your time, energy, and money in the last few years?
Well, one of the things that I'm very passionate about is the idea of exploring interests outside work as well as inside work. And for me, that's manifested in a number of what most people would call side hustles. So I have a record label called Big Community Records. That was both time investment of money as well as a lot of sort of heart and passion that went in there. I've just started a little film company called Big Community Productions. Do you see the theme there? Both of these are social purpose enterprises which are there to surface and celebrate great creative talent from less privileged backgrounds and give them their first stage to shine, whether that's in music or in film or TV. And those keep me really motivated. I'm a pretty active angel investor. So I invest in small startups, generally seed stage, and have just started a venture capital company with a couple of angel investor partners of mine that we've been doing some business with. And that gives me some amazing exposure to fantastic entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas out to disrupt the world. And, these things are definitely investments. They're definitely investments of time and energy and money. But I think they're great investments in well-being as well. They just keep me balanced and ensure that, all of my passions are served, both those at work and those outside.
And so what have you brought back from Big Community into your day job? What has been the thing that you've been directly be able to learn or apply outside of the obvious well-being things that you mentioned?
Well, I suppose, when you start a company, you become a small business owner, and whatever the nature of that business, it's about reaching customers or an audience, in my case, in a way that they find interesting and valuable, and figuring out the best way of doing that, both organically, in ways that don't cost money, but also inorganically in the form of paid for marketing, advertising, PR, this sort of thing. So I've kind of become a customer of the digital ecosystem in a sense, and a practitioner, using those tools. And I think that's tremendously valuable to bring back into a leadership position at one of these platforms, because you kind of feel what it's like to be a consumer of it. You understand the the benefit, the complications, and I think that just drives a sense of empathy and insight.
Yeah, it's a small trend from this podcast that I've interviewed a few people at ones that leap to mind. Sort of John Hall at Whirlpool. His advice was, learn how to make a website, learn how to drive traffic to it, learn how analytics work, and it just absolutely changes your ability to be a marketer and to brief teams and be able to have that empathy for the process. And Pollyanna Ward, who was our client at Wix, who set up a coffee business online, and I think it's such a great point. Like, how do you see it from both sides of the coin? So next question is, outside of these investments and these great projects, what kind of new belief or new behavior has had the biggest benefit on your work life in recent years?
I think probably most of us have been through somewhat of a metamorphosis during COVID and lockdown. Whether you're in the UK or in other countries, it kind of really shines a light, I think, on what you find valuable. And, I sort of think about that every day. I'm a meditator. I meditate in the morning, and it's a great opportunity to sort of just develop this sense of mindfulness where you're picking out the joy in the moment, wherever you are, in whatever circumstances, and being grateful about the things that drive that joy. For most people, and certainly for me, that's family and friends. Even if you're interacting with friends over Zoom or whatever your favorite video platform is, there's a connection there that fulfills us in many ways. My wife and I took to going for a walk. We live in West London. We started walking most days in Wimbledon Common. I know every part of Wimbledon Common now. It's an incredible park and facility, and just being out there, albeit in the middle of a big city, but in nature and appreciating what's around and the beauty of that. So I think this sort of sense of mindfulness, of taking what's great in the moment and really naming it and appreciating it.
So I'm curious to know about how you make that happen. Like, you're, as you mentioned, a busy guy. You've got emails to get through. You mentioned your approach to email on holiday, which you can share if you want. But how do you make sure that you meditate? Because the benefits, I don't think anyone's going to argue with you, but I struggle just to get it done. I know, like, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. But how do you make sure that your practice is a consistent one?
Well, it's tough, and I'm certainly not the high watermark in this. I'd say I'm probably fairly mediocre at it. But, there's a lot of research and writing on the topic of happiness. And happiness, the sort of current of that, the mood music goes something like this. Happiness is a behaviour and it's a habit. It's something that can be self-fulfilling in a way. I mean, if you can choose to be happy or you can choose to be unhappy, and there are various tips and techniques. And I think it's about being, again, I'll use the word mindful, but about recognizing the things that are around you, and having that positive mental attitude that spots the good stuff rather than getting overwhelmed by the bad. And I think this has really come to the fore in the context of COVID. Where there's a lot of shade in life, you tend to notice the light a lot better.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot recently about organization and trying to fit in things like meditation. And my pet theory at the minute is, if you have to write it down on a list or put it in your calendar, you don't really want to do it that much. Whereas if something you really want to do, you'll just do it, right? Like, you put a line in your diary, yeah, go for a run. Like, that's not going to make you do it, right? You either got that intent and that belief and that drive to do it. So what I'm trying to do at the minute is the people on my team will laugh about this, but I'm trying to kind of step away from being dependent on lists and triggers and nudges and trying to just be true to the thing that I want and then remembering to do it. Does that make any sense?
It makes it makes a lot of sense, and I kind of know where you're coming from. There's a counter argument or a counter school of thought that would say that the process is a deliberate one that requires some structure. I was on a call with an interesting fellow earlier on this week called Nir Eyal, and he wrote a book called Indistractable. And the title kind of says it all, right? How do you become indistractable? One of his theses is that you need to be quite structured and very deliberate. It's also true in this brain science or human science connected with it, anthropological science, I suppose you'd say, that if you repeat something 66 times, it becomes a habit. A habit in the sense that you don't any longer sort of see it as a task or a thing to do. It's just part of the daily routine. So it may require a little bit of thoughtfulness and discipline, even list writing to begin with. But once you develop the rhythm, it becomes just that, part of your daily rhythm.
Right. Tom writes a list as he speaks. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with Madfest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from Madfest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. Right. Okay. So we're loosely at the halfway stage now. So we're going to talk about your shiny new object, which I'm quite intimidated by for a bunch of reasons. But your shiny new object is quantum AI. Now, I have a beginning understanding of what that is. So could you please explain to me and the audience exactly how you see quantum AI and why that's an exciting opportunity for marketing, if not now or at some point in the future?
I should play that question back to you, Tom. You've got a beginning understanding, so let's build from that base. What do you think it is?
Oh, right. That is a tough question. Was not expecting it. So my understanding of quantum computing is that normal computing, you'd have two different states, on or off, or binary, which is the kind of foundation of all digital. And the concept of quantum AI is you can have a state which is both on and off. It is both 1 or 0. And that's where my brain starts to melt, and I don't really understand it. I don't want to fall into the trap of being one of those people that just kind of underlines it as being, just more complex computing that I don't understand. So that's the last time I talked about it. So I'm curious how wrong I am.
Tom, you're amazing. That's a very good explanation. So traditional computing, and the supercomputers that we all use every day, including our smartphones, indeed are made up of ones and zeros, and there's just lots of ones and zeros that operate applications really fast, but boils down to those two binary units. What's different about quantum computing is that it's operating using pulling from a quantum physics principle called superposition, which is what you just described. So the calculating units, if you like, which in a quantum computer are called qubits, are able to occupy a state of 1, 0, or any combination in between. And what that means, if you combine them together, clump them together, if you like, is that you set up massive parallelism, and that exponentially increases the computing power at our disposal. The complication is quantum computers, at least at the moment, require absolute zero to operate. So it's a very controlled, contained environment. It's quite difficult to maintain stability around. And there may be some advances more recently, actually, that a Google team's been working on, called a time crystal, which is a method for containing and maintaining this quantum physics state in a more sustainable way. Now, what that means, just in sort of real practical terms, is that if you take a really hard mathematical problem, for example, simulating climate, or understanding the different states of a battery in order to optimize a battery's performance, a quantum computer can just do it much better and faster than a traditional one. And the team at Google did this, I think it was October year before last, so it's been around for a bit. And they took a big mathematical equation that would have taken the most powerful traditional supercomputer, which is an IBM one, I believe, available in the world today, 10,000 years to solve. And the quantum computer solved this equation in 200 seconds. So 10,000 years versus 200 seconds. And we know how impressive and fast and amazing supercomputers are today. This is why we've got AI at all, because we've got the compute power to take petabytes of information, process it in a way that's practical and useful and spots the patterns and produces useful applications from it. But if you increase that in exponential orders of magnitude, then there's amazing things that are possible, including, for example, simulating climate and simulating the natural world, conquering some of the imponderables that have vexed medical doctors for years about conditions like Alzheimer's, for example, in drug discovery and this sort of thing, and indeed in sustainable energy applications like batteries and so on, and sustainable energy sources. So there's really interesting practical applications. Of course, all of that comes back to powerful machines that can do better stuff more quickly. And marketing, like many disciplines these days, is essentially a data-driven science. So the more powerful the tools that you've got available, the better you can do that job, and hopefully the more valuable to the end consumer you can become.
So there's a really interesting industry tension right there. Okay, so just to play that back to you, I understand it. It's going to increase computing power by having this infinite number of points between 0 and 1. That's a really nice explanation. It's really clear. So yes, if you're looking at weather systems, batteries, medical data, that is a lot of data. So, and that's data sets where, weather data, you don't need anyone's permission for that. Medical data, I assume there is some permission granted or anonymity. But with advertising, we're moving into this world where privacy is going to be everything, and it's going to opt in. And we're actually, one of the things that we're struggling with as an industry is, the data's not going to be what it was. And yes, the first party data is a thing. But even so, at an advertising level, even at a complete Google level or a complete Facebook level, you're still only going to be able to compute an aggregate, even if you do have a computer that's 10 million times faster than its predecessor. So how do you see quantum computing helping out advertising, even at a purely theoretical level? Because I don't think anyone can afford to have a quantum computer working at minus 270 degrees or whatever it is for their Christmas e-com campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting inflection point in many ways. And let me be really clear, privacy and giving the user choice is at the heart of everything that we do in Google, and very much has guided the company from the outset. And that's why if you've got a Google account, you have the ability to be everything from completely anonymous and incognito all the way up to, opting to share information that hopefully then gives you in return a more relevant, personalized experience. But you can be either end of that spectrum and anywhere in between. And the other sort of precept or central principle that Larry and Sergey founded the company on is to be obsessive about the user experience. The reason that Google products we feel are used widely is because they're good, that they're useful to people. And that just has to be the central tenet. Now, if you put those two together and sort of take it into the marketing world, what's marketing? Well, marketing is finding and helping customers learn about a product or a service that you do which delivers value to them. So it's about reach, and it's about relevance, and it's about value. So in a world where, in a cookieless world, let's put it simply like that, we don't have these personalized identifiers to operate on. What does relevance and customer value look like in a privacy safe world, in this sort of different type of environment where cookies are no longer the norm? Well, exactly as you say, Tom, you need to look at different signals, more ambient signals, and probably more numerous signals that don't come down to the atomic unit of the individual, but collectively will enable a brand to accurately reach the people that may be most interested in their product or service, by providing the sort of the spotlight, if you like, through the morass. And for consumers, right, I don't think anyone, like I enjoy my privacy, and as most people do, and I don't particularly want my information to be sort of harvested and exploited. What I do want, however, is stuff that I value and I find relevant to my moments that matter, my moments of need. And that's I think, a constant. So what's changed here, and I think it's a very positive change, we at Google embrace it, and we think it's a very positive development, is that we've moved on. We've moved to a state of the market where brands should be capable of delivering relevant, well-targeted, and valuable experiences to customers who want those services and products and enjoy using them, in a way that is a lot more subtle and ambient than the sort of primordial phase of the internet, which was driven by these sort of little cookie identifiers.
But I wonder, is there ever going to be a data set big enough that requires quantum computing? Your example between 200 seconds versus 10,000 years. I mean, that is so ginormous in scale. You almost you'd have to pull in like transport data, weather data, song lyrics from Spotify, what was popular on Netflix, in Amazon Prime, or whatever, Google Play. Would there ever be enough data to require that much crunching? I wonder. That's a fairly rhetoric question, but I think that your weather data is massive. But is advertising data ever going to be that big, I wonder?
Well, I think advertising data, perhaps. I mean, what you're modeling is human behavior and need and so on. And there are lots of humans in the world, about 8 billion of them, and and they behave in certain way. But I mean, I think the evidence is in front of us. The answer to your question is absolutely yes. There are many diseases, for example, that in spite of incredible medical advances remain insoluble, right, with the technology that we have at the moment. There are vast elements of nature, certainly in the marriage between quantum physics and the physics of the large objects, that we simply don't understand. We haven't been able to simulate and understand. I mean, what happens at the center of a black hole? we have a fair idea that there's a building climate crisis, right? It's the movement of our age, and it's urgent. Boy, would it be useful to be able to have a little bit more fidelity and granularity around understanding the elements of that and what parts will affect it more than others. Electric vehicles and electric, other things, houses and so on are coming to the fore, but battery life remains an issue. So there are many, many examples, I think, Tom, of modern problems that we don't fully understand, but we have an opportunity to get there. In the same way as we have, in the last 50 years, if you wind the clock back, using the technology that's blessed us in that period.
So, Craig, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of a podcast where we've talked about plumbing the depths of dark holes, as well as launching record labels and time crystals. So my brain is spinning at the minute. So, Craig, thank you so much. If someone who's listening to this podcast wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. That's my platform of choice on everything that I do in my work.
And what makes a killer LinkedIn outreach message to Craig?
I get a few of them these days. I mean, I think I'm really interested in meeting new people. I find it quite alluring to think that somebody sort of thought about a message before sending it. I think increasingly most of us receive messages that feel like sort of templates and haven't really thought it through or thought about the person that they're speaking to. So I think it's just common human courtesy. Know your audience. Think about the things that might matter to them, as well as what you might want from them, and figure out how to express that in a message.
Fantastic, Craig. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure, Tom.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.